The cart width is going to be 7.5 because we take the widest part of the dog, which our owner has told us is 7 inches, and we add a 1/2 inch onto that so that there is 1/4 inch on each side of the dog of wiggle room. The width of the cart is used for the top back rail and is also used for the belly bar, so you can make 2 of those. The belly bar adds extra support to the cart and helps stabilize it.
You can't do that.
We are going to be using the purple primer to go with the glue on our PVC, and this is the glue that we're using. We do have an alternate way that you can glue without primer, and I'll show you that in 1 minute. We have also had good success using this glue without primer, and it gives a good strong hold without any purple residue. We aren't using it right now because we're using up our other stuff and we're used to priming before we glue. When you prime your pieces, you want to make sure that you cover the end the width of the insertion, which is about the width of the brush, and that you do a good solid job. Go over it a few times. This prepares the PVC for the glue and helps it adhere better.
Actually,
Don't prime too many pieces before you're ready to use them. You want to try and avoid drips and drops. It'll make your cart look neater and also prevent joints that you don't want glued yet from getting glue in them. When you apply your glue, you want to put on a thin layer. Don't overdo it. It'll just make a big mess that you have to clean up. This is for the back stabilization bar. It's going to be important that once you put the second piece on, that it sits flat on the table and doesn't rock. We use a rubber mallet to make sure that the PVC pipe is all the way into the connector fitting that it's going into. This is the important part, that you want to make sure that before that glue dries, within a few seconds, that you have verified that it sits flat and that the pieces are straight on a flat surface. So this one is for the belly bar.
they're interchangeable.
After they're straight, you can use the mallet to pound it down in there, but you want to make sure you don't turn anything when you're hitting it. Next, we're measuring the pieces to connect the back of the cart to the leg that will hold the axle and the wheel. We make these 2 3/4 inches long. You'll need 2 of them. If you have a big dog, you'll want to make this maybe 3 to 4 inches long. This gives the dog extra room to poop so it doesn't land on their cart. You might notice in the directions that it says 2.5 inches, but we have been doing 2 3/4 because some of the distance is absorbed within the end of the connecting joint.
Between 1 1/4 inch
We also cut 2 pieces that are 1 inch and 3/8. These are going to be the pieces that are going to hold together these 2 pieces. They go inside. You won't see that piece, but it's going to be the connector that holds this together, and this is going to drop down to make the leg. So we've primed the ends of the 2 3/4 inch pieces and the inside of the 90-degree pieces, and we're going to be making the back assembly of the cart. And here again, it's important to make sure that it still stands straight and is not wobbly, that you have both legs inserted the same amount.
It doesn't matter until I...
Okay, so now we're putting together what's going to be the legs. Sometimes the pieces are a little bit stubborn to get in there because of the cut. So you just saw he looked inside to make sure that there was full engagement inside, that it couldn't go any farther. That's why the rubber mallet is very handy. Now we need to prime the other end. You don't want to prime it before you pound it in on the other end, because then you'll be holding on to the side that's supposed to be clean and prepared. So after you get one side in, then you can prime the other side. So we're connecting the 45-degree angle pieces now to the T, and it should close up nice and tight with the measurement we used. And you want to make sure that they're straight, otherwise your wheels will be crooked. There's usually a line that you can use as a guide on the PVC itself, or there's letters that line up that you can eyeball and follow that it's straight.
Just a minute.
While he's priming this, I wanted to let you know if something goes wrong, if you're fast enough, you can sometimes use a lever of some sort, like a long bolt, and put it in and pry and turn a piece to get it to release from another piece. It's not always successful, but sometimes you can save a joint by pulling it back apart using that. You won't be able to do it with your hands at all. Some people prefer to dry fit first to make sure that everything lines up. That might be a good way to do this as you start, just to make sure that you've got everything the right length and everything is symmetrical. But it also means you have to put the cart together twice. We're going to be using a square here to make sure that the legs are going to be going on and are perpendicular to the ground. We leave just a slight bit of angle.
So from this center line, you tilt it out.
We like
We're
to
talk-
tilt them out just the tiniest little bit beyond 90. There's just a hair difference. It's probably 90 some degrees. That just makes it so that the wheels will sit in a better position for rolling later. And it just comes with experience to know that the wheels roll better that way. If you're into cars at all, they call this towing out.
No,
No?
this is camber.
Sorry, this is camber.
This is toe.
Okay, so he says that's tow and that is camber. So what we did, adjusted the camber. Next, we're going to be figuring out how long the arm pieces need to be. And since this is a bigger cart that we're building, we're going to have the belly bar on it. So we need to figure out where we want the belly bar to sit. And ideally, you want it to be at least 5 inches behind the front legs. And the way that we've had you measure for the cart, the end of your measurement, which for this dog was 23.5 inches in length for the cart, that ends at the center of the front shoulder. So we want to go back a little bit so that we're at the edge of the back of the front leg, and then at least 5 inches behind that, because they use their front legs still, so we need to give them room to have a stride there. And when we measure, we're measuring the inside measurements of the cart, not the outside. We don't want to measure the PVC. This particular cart is 23.5 inches long. So what we did was we divided that in half, and that comes out to be 12 and a little bit. So we're going to put that T for the belly bar at 13 inches. If you look here, measuring how much pipe we have roughly 3 3/4 inches of useful length, and then the fitting starts again, and we need to allow for the amount of pipe that's going to go inside that fitting. So you don't want to measure from the outside of the fitting. You want to leave a little bit of extra for the inside of the fitting. And then we're going to do the same for both sides, so everything will be symmetrical. So if you look at my math, the first one that we did, we went from where we're setting the T at 12.5, and we subtracted the 3 3/4, and that back piece of the arm is going to end up being 8 3/4. Then we did the front piece. The overall cart length is 23.5, and we subtracted the 13.5 from the other side of the T, and we got 10 inches for the front. So now we have the two back pieces that are 8 3/4 inches long each. And we'll prime those and glue those in. So we're getting ready to attach the part of the arm that's going to attach to the belly support bar.
Not now.
And now when we put these pieces in, we're going to have to make sure that the T's are perpendicular to the table. so that they'll be straight and go down the dog's side and not under at an angle. It's just ever so fine of an adjustment to make it perfect. Well, as perfect as you can. You do one side at a time. So here we're measuring the 10 inches for the front part of the arms. These are just little safety caps that make it so the cart doesn't catch on your furniture, and it has a nice, you know, finished look to it. And we just slide those on. We don't usually glue them, and then we'll pound them in with the mallet. You want to pound them both in equally far so the cart is equal in length. So we're doing cart height next. To figure out the height, you want to take the height of your dog at the shoulder, which is measurement A, and subtract measurement D, which is the height of the dog up to the groin. And you go straight from the ground up between their back legs to where you first touch skin. Subtract those two numbers, get that answer, then divide that by 2. So here we have 20.5 minus 15.5, which gives us 5. And then we're dividing 5 by 2, which is 2.5. Then we add that back on to D, or you could subtract it from A, but it's easier to add on to D. And we end up with 2.5 plus 15.5, and we get 18 inches for this cart total height. This height right here, it's hard to tell from my angle. But if we're measuring the usable length, we're at 2 3/4.
2.5.
2.5. So we've got 2.5 inches of height already built into the cart. This particular cart height is 18 inches, so we have a
It's 12 inches. If you ask me, it's 12 inches.
So we have a 12-inch wheel that we're using. So the way we like to do it is to set the tape measure at the cart height at the edge of the wheel. If we go to the center of the hub, this shows us that the hub is at 12 inches. This cart is going to need a second support in the back. It's going to have 2 bars in the back. So knowing that our center of the hub is at 12 inches and that our total height is 18, we need to take 2.5 inches off because we already have that built into the cart. That leaves us with 9.5 inches that we need to make up in the length of the PVC. And knowing that we have to put in another bar to support the cart, we need to split that in half. So 9.5 broke in half or cut in half is 4 3/4. So we're going to need 2 4 3/4 inch pieces. Okay, this is a little sidebar. If you were doing, say, a dachshund cart, which most of them are about 7 inches tall, you wouldn't need a back support bar. because the leg length going to the wheel is very short. So you can just go straight down to the wheel. Okay, so for this 7-inch height for a Dachshund cart, we still have the 2.5 inches that the leg is making up. And if we look, the hub sits at 5 1/8. And if we go to 6 1/4, that's a reasonable place to stop, because we don't want the PVC to scrape on the ground, so we need to leave room so that the PVC doesn't scrape the ground.
Plus you usually go for.
This also leaves us a little bit of room so we can adjust up one hole in case the height isn't exact from the measurements or the dog isn't sitting comfortably. So this won't focus. If we take that 6 1/4 and we subtract the 2 1/2 of length we already have, we get 3 3/4 inches of axle length that we need. So now we know how long we need to make the leg for a Dachshund cart, just as an example in this short video. Your Dachshund cart also will not need a belly bar. Dachshund cart is just arms and a back and legs. So we had said that we were going to, on this bigger cart, use 4 3/4 because that was half of the 9 1/2 that we needed to complete the leg length. We've decided that we're going to round up to 5 inches here because some of that is going to go into engagement into the fitting, and it will help this will also give the tube where we're going to be putting the axle bolt through some extra support
Just won't make it as long.
by not making it as long. So a clearer way for me to say that is we've decided to make the upper section a little bit longer because it doesn't need as much strength as the lower section that is going to be connected to the axle with the wheel. So we've made that 5 inches, and we'll make up that difference in the bottom piece by making it shorter. And this doesn't have to be done. It's just kind of one of those things that as you go, you kind of learn to do. Okay, what we do next is we set the T's on that are going to go on next, that are going to be holding the back support bar. And we measure across the top of those. This one measures 11 1/4 inches from inside to inside measurement. The 90-degree bar that we're going to be putting on, is actually going to go with a piece of PVC towards the back. And that gives you the width of your support bar, which is going to be 11 1/4 inches. And it's going to be larger than your top support bar because we've come out the width of the wheels. So we have to remeasure, and that was the 11 1/4. So this cart's going to be a little bit wider on the bottom than it is on the top, which is fine. It's not going to be squeezing the dog. When I primed these two 90-degree pieces, I got a little bit sloppy and it dripped. You can see my fingerprint there. It's a good time to remind you that this primer stains and it will not come out of clothes no matter what. So You want to wear some knockabout clothes when you're working on this because you could ruin what you're wearing. Here the same procedure applies. We're putting this bar together just like the back bar and the belly bar. We want to make sure that it's straight, that it doesn't wobble. And this is our 11 1/4 inch bar that's going to sit below the back bar and offer support to the cart. Okay, the next step is to figure out how far we need to go from our T connector so that we meet in the correct spot with our bottom support bar. So we're going flat against the back of the leg T to the inside of the 90-degree lower support bar, and we get exactly 4 inches. Please remember as we're going through that this is for this specific cart. Your cart is going to have different dimensions depending on the size of the dog you are building it for. And again, if you're building for a small dog, you don't have to do any of these steps. You're already done. So here we're installing the 4-inch PVC pipe pieces. So we took the 2 pieces that we had resting on the top and attached those to the 4-inch pieces. Now we're ready to attach those back onto the leg pieces. So these pieces have been primered and glued onto there before we set them up in their permanent place on the legs. Right now the cart is upside down. We're building it upside down. Here you want to give a little extra support with your hand when you're pounding that hard so it doesn't break the fitting down below. If you turn the cart right side up now, everything should be square and level. So after a quick check, now we're on to the bottom part of the legs, which are going to be a little bit shorter than that top piece, and we're going to remeasure just to make sure that once we take into consideration the connections, we have the right measurement. We also want to make sure that everything's level at this point, so we just gave it an extra tap with the hammer to make sure that they're both measuring the same on each side. And they are now.
Start with this.
So as a review, now we have 9 inches of usable height already built into our cart. With the measuring tape set at 18 inches, our overall goal height. Our hub is at 12 inches. Our axle is at 12 inches. And now we need to take into consideration that we want some room for adjustment. So we need to think, how far can we adjust or leave room for adjustment without that PVC pipe dragging on the ground?
So I'm going to go 14 inches minus the 9 inches of usable pipe. So that makes my pipe 5 inches that I need to cut. But go ahead.